Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, pardon me. Regarding the one tribe, and I won't mispronounce it, that you mentioned that straddles this border, is there any sense that this tribe would prefer to be entirely within Afghanistan or entirely within Pakistan, or that they would prefer autonomy?
No, thank you very much for the question. That will be much shorter and less shorter-winded, let me say. We're referring to an ethnic group rather than a tribe, the Pashtuns. And no, I don't think that they have any particular desire. I would certainly say this about the Afghan Pashtuns, other than wanting a little piece of Pakistan during the time of since the World War II, when the concept of Pashtunistan was created. That was something that the Afghan governments at the time used as a foreign cause that was useful to them, to have something that they were demanding. Peshawar, when I lived in Afghanistan in the 1960s, city of Peshawar, capital of the Northwest Frontier Province, was referred to in the Afghan press. Its dateline was Peshawar, Central Occupied Pashtunistan. There was that little tiff among that was popular with the Afghan regime. So no, I don't think that all the Pashtuns in Afghanistan would want to flow into the Northwest Frontier Province, although, and the federally administered tribal areas, although let it be said that an awful lot of them did, along with Afghans from other parts of the country, during the Soviet occupation, and they were hosted by the Pakistan government for a number of years, and it was a major effort that the Pakistan government made. I don't see Pashtun reivindications on each and the other country, apart from Pashtunistan, which I mentioned, as being major problems that the two states have to deal with.
Mr. Dunbar, to make it as simple as possible, might an answer be to give them all a better standard of living in that area?
Yes, it certainly would be. And had I not spent a little bit more time than I should have on Sir Mortimer Durand and the Iron Amir, I would have and had spelled out more formally a two-legged policy approach that I would adopt. The one being regional dialogue, seeking solutions to a variety of the problems that there are in the region. The second would definitely be doing a better job of helping, of promoting economic development in particularly the federally administered tribal areas and also in the Northwest Frontier Province in Pakistan, and then throughout the south and east of Afghanistan. I want to say that at the last of the second of the LDESP conferences that I attended, there was a USAID representative who was quite positive about what could be done in Afghanistan given enough money and enough time. And by enough money, we are speaking of chump change in terms of what we spend and must spend when we are engaged in military operations. But I think that is the key to the problem. Now, the difficulty of delivering that aid in Afghanistan is substantial, delivering it and making it effective. In the federally administered tribal areas, it is really hard. But there is a sense that this needs to happen. And I think that creative people will be able, I hope, over time, to provide an alternative employment to the young men and young women in these regions of the country, along with, of course, education. One of the things that is most sad about Afghanistan and Pakistan, although I'm not as familiar with the traditions of Pakistan, but in Afghanistan, suicide was anathema. And that is generally true in Islam, but the Afghans, being good guerrilla fighters, were not into suicide. They weren't into the suicide vest. They were into Minuteman style, getting down behind a wall and blowing away your adversary in relative security. That's how you win a guerrilla war. It's how you win the military side of a guerrilla war. What the Taliban and Al-Qaeda human resources people have been promoting is the short-term, spectacular, meteoric career, I guess we could say. And the fact that Afghans and Pakistanis are strapping on those suicide vests is, to me, extremely sad and a measure of the desperation that people on both sides of the Durand line feel.
What do you think are the chances of the Taliban gaining control of Pakistani nuclear weapons, and what do you think would happen if they did?
I think the chance exists, and that to me is of enormous concern. I don't think the chance is good. I think it would be headed off in some way diplomatically up to and including finding elements in that, in whoever, whatever the group was that took over the Pakistan government and was in a position to gain control of those weapons, that steps would be taken. That would be a point at which many people in Pakistan, including most of the Pakistan army, I would estimate, would step in, and certainly people from the outside, up to and including the United States, would deal with it. I can't speculate because we're saying if the Taliban were to take over, I'd need to know a bit more of what the conditions were likely to be. The Taliban is not a I'm falling into the Taliban are not a monolith. The singular of Taliban is Talib, and so the Taliban are not a monolith. There would clearly be an effort made, as has been done in the past, to find people who are kind of on this planet in the 21st century that you could deal with, and to try to cobble something together that made sure, as a first step, that those weapons were brought under secure control. But that is why, in my judgment, we have a vital national interest in seeing that this problem gets solved.
Thanks for coming. It's said that there are good Taliban and there are bad Taliban, and the administration seems to be following a potential negotiation with the so-called good Taliban. Is there any reason to expect some success from such a strategy? Are there good and bad Taliban?
Yeah, thanks, Art. That was a good question, and I think that Mike Michelson would have been pleased. I find it very, very difficult to put good in front of the word Taliban. I find it easier to put bad in front of the word Taliban. I would tend to be using a word more like reasonable, people that you could negotiate with.